Well, the original owner of this property, James Purdy, actually was on a trip out west, and when he went through Iowa, he actually saw an octagonal barn, and it inspired him so that he came back home and he said, "I'm going to build this someday." When James Purdy finally in 1923 decided to build the barn, he got a hold of the Monroe brothers from Gagetown, and he talked to them, brought them out here to get it built, and they're the ones that already built his house. Once they figured out what he was going to have to do, they needed some architectural engineering background to make sure that this barn was going to be the way it is. They consulted with the local math teacher and the principal, Russell Yeager, and he gave them the information as to how to engineer this building. Well, this barn, being an octagon barn, is an 8-sided barn. Each side is 42 feet 6 inches long and 24 feet high. The foundation is a cement foundation that's 3 feet in the ground and 4 feet above the ground. And then the wood wall above it is 20 feet high to actually do the sidewalls of this octagon barn. From there on, they started putting the roof on, and it's actually a 3-stage roof. The first roof was the longest. It was a 5/12 pitch, and at the top of this 36-foot roof area, there was a dormer on each of the 8 sections. The dormer went out. It was 8 foot wide. It was 5 foot 8 inches high, and in the front of the dormer there was a 9-light window. And then back up on the second wall at the back of the dormer, there were 2 9-light windows on each side of that dormer on that second wall. Once you went up to the second roof, it was much shorter, and it went up to the third wall of the building. And in that wall, the windows, there had, again, the 9-light windows in each of the 8 sides of the top section, and then the roof of it actually had a vent on it. This vent system, you can see the 4 boxed-in ducts going up on 2 of them on this side, 2 of them on that side. They go up, they cross over on each side, and then they go straight up, and then they take another box that goes all the way up to the vent on the roof. And what that is all about is that when they had all the animals around the lower part of this thing, that in order to get the air moving through there and get rid of the smell and everything that was going on there, this is what this whole vent system was used for. In regular barns, these rectangular barns, when they have that hay car system, it's just a straight track at the top of the barn. In these octagon barns, these circular barns, they actually had to put a circular track around the top of the barn to oversee the loft areas. And once that track went all the way around, it came to about 6 feet from the end, and then it was stopped there. They didn't hook it together because that hay car on the track was only moved in these directions, back and forth from the center. So the hay car up here on the ceiling on the west side actually went over both lofts, on the south side and on the north side, to pick up hay, to pick up whatever, and then get it to the cattle or the animals down below. Well, this ground floor is a little different than it was originally. When we first came here, this arena here was a dirt floor, and there was a concrete foundation over here for a wood stave silo that used to be there, that was used to feed grain to the animals that were housed on the perimeter of the barn here. When we got here, the silo itself was gone. The foundation, the wood cement foundation, was still there. On this side of the building, there was a scale built into the floor. So when they were taking the animals into Gagetown to sell them at the auction or whatever, they would weigh them first before they would take them there. When we actually got in here and we got people walking around, looking at the place and so on, we thought we better fill this arena in with a cement floor so that people weren't going to trip and whatever else. So we did that. At the entrance here, we put a visitor center and so on. But the rest of the perimeter of this barn on the lower level is all what it used to be, where they had things for the cattle, the horses, the pigs, all of that type of stuff. On the west side of the barn, we have the granary, which was used to provide all the grain for a variety of things, feeding the cattle, plus taking into the town to the elevator and so on. And then across from the granary is the current day Welcome Center, which was the original tack room. Well, in 1991, when people from the area heard that the DNR was going to maybe tear these buildings down because they had bought all this property, a lot of the people started getting together, and in 1993 they actually approached the DNR and said, this has a historic background and we don't want it to be torn down. Well, finally when the DNR checked that out and found out that they were registered, then they backed off a little bit. Then in 1995, when things came along, they actually understood that the people that were involved in this thing and trying to save it were moving forward. And they actually came to them and said, could we have some property to use and to keep going forward? So they actually gave them 10 acres of property, which in those days, they started a program in the fall of the year called Fall Family Days. And that was only on a Saturday in those days. And they brought people in to recognize what this was all about and to make sure that people understood why they were trying to save it. So when that happened, they kept on moving forward, and in 1997 they actually had the building revitalized. They started on the roof of the barn, and the shingles were bad, and there were holes in the roof. And in those days, it was actually a 4-in-1 shingle, not a 3-in-1 shingle like we have today. So what they did was they came in here and they got some Amish people to work with this guy, and they started working on the hole. The biggest hole was on the west side on the front of the barn, and so they tore off all the shingles, they replaced rafters, they replaced roof boards, and then they re-shingled that whole lower level. During that whole summer, they replaced 5 different sections, and then the following year, they came back and they replaced the 3 sections on the north side that didn't have holes in them, but they just had to be, redone because of the age of the shingles and everything. So that's what really brought us out here and what got us going. Once that was done, then they started replacing the siding on the barn. It was a 1x12 shiplap siding, and they actually put all new siding on, most of it. You can look around on the inside here and see there's only a few original boards. Most of it is new lumber. So they got that done, and then below that, where the windows were, they actually had to replace the 1/2x6 beveled siding, and they replaced the trim around the windows and everything else, and actually redid. And then when they got up to the top of the siding where the overhang is, some of those rafters had to be replaced at the end. So they replaced them as well and kept on moving forward. We had to actually, on the north side of the barn, we had to do quite a bit of work because the cement foundation was actually settling and splitting and actually moving out. So what we did was we tore a lot of that foundation out of there, and then we re-poured it down in the ground, getting that 3-foot base, and then the 4 foot above the ground, getting it up there so that we could actually get it back so it's straight up and to carry the weight of the rest of the siding above it. The timbers actually came from on site here, back behind the building here, back in the swamp area. This tamarack trees were growing there, and so the Monroe brothers went back and cut them down. They actually had them cut into 8x8, 9x9 timbers, and that's what they used to build the barn, to frame it up and everything. The sidewalls, the posts, everything are from tamarack. Once that was done, James Purdy actually owned a lumber yard in Gagetown, so he provided all of the 1x12 shiplap siding and the 1/2x6 redwood siding and everything for the rest of the barn, and the roof boards and everything else, and that's what actually brought it together. What we've got to do now is, since we got that roof done back in '97, we now have problems on the roof today, and the shingles have, some of the shingles are gone. We are actually working on having a new roof put on this coming year in 2015. Well, in 2003, we had worked with the DNR for a couple of years, and they finally came along and said, okay, they would sell it to us. And we bought 26.5 acres, a 1/4 mile of frontage on Ritchie Road here. And we paid the DNR for the 26.5 acres, and then it actually became a historic site. All these items that you see here in the barn, plus there's so many other items out in the sawmill building or in the house or whatever. People, when they found out that this era back in the 1920s was what we were all about, we started having people donate things from that era. We've had over 3,000 things donated in the last 19 years. And it has a lot to do with farming, house items, old wood stoves for a kitchen we've gotten. It's a variety of things. We've got things out in the sawmill building, which were actually used when they were cutting trees down way back in the late early 1900s. I would say the things that the lumberjacks used and the builders used to cut the trees down, to put the log cabins up or houses up, all of those tools that were hand tools, that's probably the most unique thing that we have. We have reason to believe that with all of our investigating, checking other octagon barns throughout the country, that this is the largest wood-structured octagon barn in the whole United States of America.